Hello fellow brawlers, it's with great pleasure that I finally bring you the boss fight Kairos tier list. You guys asked for it, and so it's coming your way. Hope you enjoy. Okay guys, now before we jump into this, I did want to give you a quick little bit of information on how this is made. First of all, I've got tons of pros that are helping me put this all together, and I went through and I played every single brawler multiple times throughout boss fight, which is not the most efficient use of tickets, by the way. May my tickets rest in peace. But I love you guys, so it was totally worth it. Now this tier list is a combination of both how does the brawler do when he's not the boss, and how does the brawler do when he is the boss. More so weighing the how does he do when he's not the boss than when he is the boss, because, you know, 5 out of the 6 times you're more likely to be not the boss than the boss. So it does weigh a little bit into this tier list. Now let's go ahead and talk about the F tier. It kind of is a combination of like C tier and D tier and F tier brawlers. Really what it comes down to it is these are the brawlers that are not good for boss fight, and you just shouldn't play them. Let's go ahead and start off by talking about Brock. Brock just is not good at boss fight. It's really hard for him to hit boss because they move so quickly, and his slow reload speed means that he does very little damage when he's not the boss, and also when he is the boss he only hits 1, maybe 2 targets with 1 rocket if he actually lands a hit, and that paired up with the slow reload speed means he just has awful DPS. His super is pretty okay against the boss, but it's easily dodgeable and it's not enough to justify him being in the B tier, so just don't play Brock. Next we have El Primo. El Primo has to get really close to people to deal damage, and he just doesn't deal enough damage to justify having him getting that close to a boss who can wipe him out in 1 or 2 shots. He may be decent as a boss, but shotgunners are going to wreck him. If he does have his super charged up, he could use it to run away as the boss, but because he's so weak as a brawler, I just wouldn't use him. Next we have Poco. Poco has very little DPS. His healing is not very useful in most situations because people die so quickly in boss fights, so he's not oftentimes able to heal. Like, they just die before he can even heal them. As the boss, his low DPS makes him just not that great, and his healing is heavily nerfed as the boss, which means that he's just not great as a boss either. Up next we have Penny. Penny's shots are really hard to hit a moving target, particularly a fast-moving boss. Even though they do have that bigger hitbox, it's still pretty difficult. Her turret is super easy to dodge, and even though it does have quite a bit of HP, when she is the boss, you can basically just ignore it as long as you're just being really careful. As a boss, she can use her splash damage to take out multiple people, but there are better options, and her turret is much easier to avoid than Jesse's, so you don't have to really worry about taking it out if you're facing against it. You just chase down the Penny. Next we have Piper, guys. Please just don't. Unless you like know that you're going to be the boss and you just want to make it easy on the people to win lots of gold, just don't play Piper. It is super hard for you to hit her shots due to fast-moving bosses. She has a really slow reload speed, and she only hits 1 person, so as a boss she's just awful. And really the only thing that she has going for her is that she's pretty. Pam is also in the F tier. For really high damage, you have to get up close, and getting up close to a boss just is not that great. It's not a good idea because they deal so much damage to you. Even from a distance, her chip damage is just basically useless in comparison to other brawlers. Her turret is all about helping people stay alive over a long period of time, and that's just not helpful in a boss fight situation. And as a boss, her healing station is really heavily nerfed, so it doesn't help very much, and she does really little DPS, and so she's just not as good as a boss either. Okay, now this next one we got Mortis in the F tier. Now I will say that he is an amazing boss because he can just run away, but he's so awful when he's not the boss. He really could be the worst. Like Piper, Mortis, when he's facing against the boss, it's a toss-up. They're both really awful. And so because of that, I don't think that it justifies playing him because of how bad he is when he's not the boss. Even if you are going for being a boss for a really long time to get that on the profile, there are more consistent options that can actually last longer than a Mortis anyway. So I just wouldn't play Mortis in boss fight. Up next, guys, we have the B tier. These are brawlers that are good for boss fight. You can play them if you want to mess around with them and have some fun. But typically there are better options. Starting off in the B tier, we have Bull. Now, Bull does have to get really close to the boss to deal damage, and that's kind of a tricky situation, particularly if you're facing off against another shotgunner because they'll take you out so quickly. But bosses do a lot of damage, and so if you get too close, it kind of makes it a little tricky for a bull. But he does have the HP to give him some survivability. As long as you're careful enough to fall back and heal, he can be pretty decent there. His slow reload speed means he does have a lowered damage per second if he is the boss, and his super can help as the boss for him to like run away from people or for to get up close to an enemy boss or something like that. But just overall B tier, he's good. Next we have Jessie. Jessie is one of the best bosses in the game, but she's really not that great as a brawler. Better than Mortis though, okay? So I do think that she's justified in the B tier. So let's talk about why Jessie's such a great boss, okay? Her turret has a ton of HP, which is very difficult to clear, and by the time people are able to clear it, oftentimes she has another turret charged up and ready to go. Her shots can chain, which allows her to quickly wreck 3 people at a time. Healing her turret is actually phenomenal because it shows you where enemy brawlers are and things like that. But as a brawler facing off against the boss, she does very little damage output, and she has little HP, so she gets taken out pretty easily. Her reload speed is pretty slow, so she's just not that great, and so that's why we decided to put her into the B tier rather than in the A tier or S tier, because she's such a great boss. If you're trying to get the highest time possible, Jessie is one of those brawlers that is pretty fantastic as boss. But there are other options that are a little bit more frequently viable, so I recommend going with them. Also in the B tier we have Bo. Bo's basically only good if you have one maxed Bo on your team. If you don't have a maxed Bo, he's F tier. His sight, the reason why I say that is because his sight is useful to the team. He can see a really far distance. His mines are kind of okay at like forcing a boss to move a certain way, but bosses move really, really quickly, so they can actually just like walk right over the mines and it's not even an issue as long as they're doing that. His low damage output is also a little bit difficult. I really wouldn't want 2 Bows on my team if I was trying to take out a boss. Maybe just one so I can get that sight bonus. But other than that, I'd rather switch out a different brawler that does more consistent damage than Bo does. Next we have Ricochet. Damage is pretty good for Ricochet, especially if you're good at banking his shots. He has really low HP, which makes it a little bit tricky for him to survive, but if he can keep his distance and stay alive, bounce those shots well, then he's a pretty decent option. As the boss as well, he can deal some pretty good decent damage on top of that. He does have a really low HP, and so that can make things a little bit tricky for him, but he's B tier overall, I would say, both as boss and playing against the boss. Next we have Dynamite. Dynamite has pretty good survivability because of his use of walls. He deals pretty high damage, and it's actually not too difficult to aim your shots against the boss as Dynamite. As the boss, he can do decent damage, but it is hard to land enough shots to like tanks or heavier brawlers that do a really good job at coming up close on him. So it's pretty easy to get swarmed as a Dynamite as the boss. He does pretty great as the boss on the other map where he can actually hide behind that wall barricade, but I don't think that's enough to justify him putting up higher than the B tier. Lastly in the B tier we have Terra. Terra deals really good damage up close, okay, so she's okay as the boss, but when she's not the boss, she has to stay away from the boss because they deal so much damage, and so that means that she has to just like land 1 or 2 cards per throw, and that means that it takes a really long time for her to build up her super, which is the main reason why Terra does a good job against enemy bosses, is because of her super. So it takes so long to do it, and there are other brawlers that do a better job with their super at actually controlling the enemy boss, which is why I think overall she's just a B tier brawler for boss fight. Next we have the A tier, which is for brawlers that are great at boss fight. We're going to start off by talking about Colt, okay? So Colt has a really high survivability due to his distance and being able to attack from a distance, and if you have him maxed out, his running speed is really fantastic, which allows him to run away as a boss very, very well, or to track down the boss if he is on the offense. Now it is kind of difficult to land all of your shots as Colt, but if you can do so, he has an extremely high damage per second, and the increased hitbox of an enemy boss does help somewhat with that. Lastly, his super does a really great job at filling a lot of different roles. He can use it to clear grass if needed, he can break through walls if needed, he can shoot from a distance if needed, just deal a ton of damage if that's an option. Overall, I think Colt deserves that A tier spot, assuming you're really good at aiming with him. If you're not great at aiming with him, he's probably B tier. Next we have Barley, who has a pretty good survivability due to him being able to hide and throw behind walls and things like that, so he's able to stay alive and consistently deal damage to the enemy boss. He can actually frequently land his hit if you're good with aiming with him. Usually an enemy boss won't get 2 ticks of damage on them because they can run through so quickly, but at least one of the 2 ticks possible with Barley's shots will usually deal some damage. On top of that, Barley has the potential to absolutely shred through an enemy boss's HP. Usually an enemy boss can run really quickly or avoid his super, but if you do have a Spike or a Frank on there, Barley pairing his super with Spike's or Frank's super just basically can spell ultimate doom to a boss, which is one reason why he does better than Dynamite. Also, one quick note, on the other map than what's going on in this gameplay right here, which will happen in 2 weeks from today, Barley is S tier as a boss, and the reason why is because he's able to hide behind that barricaded wall and really shred people before they're able to come around, sometimes even preventing them from being able to deal damage or break through that barricade at all. Next we have Darryl. Darryl does a ton of damage. He does have to get close to enemy brawlers, but one thing that's really nice about him is that if he does die, he can typically charge up his super fast enough and get really close into the action just by using it to roll right up into position. And not to mention the fact that as a boss, he can usually get rid of enemy brawlers really quickly and charge up his super and use that to run clear across the enemy map and basically just have people running the entire time. I've actually seen some Darryls get some pretty long times as the boss. Last in the A tier, we have Crow. Crow is excellent as the boss because he can run away so well. He has such a fast move speed, and his jump allows him to just jump across the map and basically make it super hard for people to get rid of him. On top of that, he can also use his poison to be able to know exactly where enemy brawlers are. Against the boss, he's only decent. He has such little HP that he just can't get very close to the boss, and so because of that, he has really little damage output throwing those poison daggers from a distance. The poison does help kind of ping where the boss's location is, which does help, and his star power does decrease the boss's damage per second, but their DPS is so high that honestly it doesn't even really impact things that much. Supering on the boss is basically a suicide mission as Crow because he'll get taken out so quickly, and you really don't need it to run away from the boss that much. And because of all of those things combined, I think that he's just overall solid A tier. Lastly, we have the S tier, which is for excellent brawlers for boss fight. If you want to earn as much gold as you can for every ticket that you put into boss fight, these are the brawlers that you're going to want to play because they are going to consistently give you value every single match, whether you're the boss or not. We're going to start off by talking about Nita. If I wanted to get as long a time as a boss as possible, I would play Nita every single match, okay? Her bear has insane amounts of HP when she's the boss, and it's faster than all of the brawlers in the game, which basically means that it can just push people down. They have to deal with it. It's not like Jesse's turret where they can just like try and avoid it. They have to deal with it, and otherwise they will just get shredded. On top of that, she actually has a really decent amount of HP, and she can attack through multiple brawlers, so 3 quick swipes in one direction will get rid of most of the brawlers. Now when she's not playing as the boss, she can actually keep her distance pretty well, and her high HP allows her to survive a lot as well and be able to throw down that bear. Charging up that pretty quickly allows that bear to actually like locate where the boss is if they're hiding in bushes or something like that. And honestly, that's why I think that Nita does deserve this S tier spot for boss fight. Next we have Shelley. Shelley is an amazing brawler to have in your combination if you do want to try and take out a boss as quickly as possible. Yes, she does have to get close to enemy brawlers to really deal a ton of damage, but what makes her great is the fact that she can quickly build up her super and shoot off one super and blast a ton of damage through that enemy boss, and that allows her to chain supers over and over and over again. You do have to be careful as a Shelley if you're playing against a boss that is like a really heavy tank or something like that can just like blast her up really close, but if you can survive well, you can chain that super multiple times over and over again before you do get taken out. On top of that, she deals a ton of damage due to the large boss's hitbox and their HP. She can just shred through them and deal a ton of right there. She's a fantastic boss since she can get rid of basically any brawler that gets close to her, and once she does get rid of them, she charges up that super. If she's afraid of somebody getting close, she can blast them with her super. She's just overall really fantastic. Let's go ahead and talk about Frank. Frank is only honestly decent as the boss, okay? Because of that shot delay, people can get really close to him, do a lot of damage to him. They can interrupt his super and basically waste it. So that's one thing that happens with Frank. But we put him in the S tier because of how great he is against the boss. He's probably the best brawler to play against the boss to consistently earn you lots of gold because of his ability to stun the enemy boss for a long period of time. In fact, if you have 2 Franks on your team, if they time their stuns right, they can actually perma stun an enemy boss, which means that he cannot move or do anything until his HP is dwindled down to nothing. Lastly, guys, we have Spike. Spike is such a good brawler versus a boss because of his high damage from a distance and because of how quickly he's able to charge up his super. His super is extremely useful against the boss due to how it slows that boss and basically allows everybody to pile up on them. And on top of that, as the boss, he actually does pretty decently because he can take people out one at a time super quickly. Still, not as great as other brawlers as the boss, and he does have to be careful to try and keep his distance due to his low HP, but because of his super and being able to chain those supers over and over again, Spike really is an S tier brawler for boss fight. Thank you guys so much for watching this. I've got this wonderful little image here that you can take a picture of or a screenshot so you don't have to keep on watching through the entire video for future reference. And if you did have some disagreements with some of the brawlers in these tiers, make sure you drop it in the comment section below. I will definitely be looking through there for some feedback. Make sure you go ahead and share that with your friends so that they know which brawlers are the best for boss fight. And of course, guys, I wanted to give a huge thank you to the pros that helped me with making this tier list. We have Cradu, Illustria, It's the U-Day, Jeff, Lex, Pika, Portal, Prodigy, Super Bram, The Secret, and Wave Rider. Thank you to them. Thank you to you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe for future Brawl Stars content. And for now, this is Kairos Time ticking by. We will see you in Brawl Stars.